In a city built on ice and secrets, I was invisible, just a pair of hands serving whiskey to monsters. But one note, 7 scribbled words, and a split-second choice didn't just save a ruthless mob boss's life. It started a war that would burn Chicago to the ground. I had exactly 45 seconds before the silver dessert spoons clinked against fine china and the bullets hit his chest. Welcome back to Afro-Korean Soul Tales, where dark romance meets dangerous destinies. Before we light the match on this powder keg, make sure you are subscribed. You don't want to be left in the dark when the secrets start spilling. Hit the like button if you're ready to risk it all for a stranger, and let's begin. My hand trembled just enough to smudge the blue ballpoint ink as I creased the receipt into quarters, pressing the sharp edge against my thumb until it hurt. The paper felt impossibly fragile, thinner than a moth's wing, as if the sheer weight of the secret written inside might disintegrate it before I could reach him. Around me, the gilded lotus hummed with the narcotic low frequency of extreme wealth. It was a sound distinct from the rest of the world, the delicate chiming of crystal flutes against porcelain, the murmur of muted, confident laughter, and the soft, sibilant whisper of silk sliding against hand-stitched leather booth seats. Outside, Chicago's January wind battered the floor-to-ceiling glass like a wild animal trying to get in, howling with a fury that froze the bones. But in here, everything was warm. Too warm. Suffocatingly fragrant with truffle oil, heavy perfumes, and the metallic tang of impending violence. I approached table 1 like a woman walking toward her own guillotine. Park Jae-hoon sat with his back to the panoramic glass wall, the sprawling city skyline glittering behind him like a throne of diamonds and ice. He didn't look real. He looked like he had been carved from obsidian and marble, a statue brought to life by some dark magic. His jawline was razor-sharp, his jet black hair slicked back with severe precision, and he wore a Tom Ford suit that cost more than my father's medical bills for the entire year. His right hand rested on the white tablecloth, fingers drumming a slow, predatory rhythm that seemed to sync with my racing heart. Beside him, Bianca Moretti leaned in close, whispering something that made her blood-red lips curve into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her diamond chandelier earrings caught the flickering candlelight, throwing fractured rainbows across her pale skin. To the casual observer, she looked like a woman hopelessly in love. She was radiant, tactile, and attentive. She wasn't in love. 20 minutes ago, I had heard her order his execution. The wine cellar at the Gilded Lotus wasn't just a storage room. It was a subterranean cathedral dedicated to fermentation and money. It was a temperature-controlled vault deep in the basement, constructed of glass walls and soft, amber lighting that made the bottles glow like dormant jewels. I had been sent down to retrieve a 2015 Barolo for Table 7, threading my way past towering rows of dusty Bordeaux and velvet-smooth Burgundies. The air down there was always crisp, smelling of cork and oak. I was scanning the labels, humming a tune under my breath, when the heavy steel door at the top of the stairs clicked open. Voices drifted down. Female. Sharp. Speaking rapid-fire Italian. I froze between the Chiantis and the Brunellos, my hand hovering over the bottleneck I'd been reaching for. Si al tavolo uno. Vicino al vetro. Yes, he's at table 1. By the glass. My Italian was restaurant level at best, just enough to explain the specials or know when a patron was insulting me versus flirting. But I caught the fragments, and the fragments were enough to stop my blood cold. Table 1. The glass wall. Gli altri sono già in posizione. The others are already in position. Uno al bar. 1 at the bar. Tre vicino alla cucina. 3 near the kitchen. And then she switched languages. Her voice dropped an octave, shifting into something guttural and faster Russian, perhaps? It sounded like she was wrapping razor wire around her tongue. Sharper. Deadlier. I should have announced myself. I should have cleared my throat, dropped a glass, made my presence known like a professional server. Instead, I stood paralyzed in the shadows of the vintage racks, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I listened. She switched back to Italian, breathless with anticipation. You'll have a clean shot as soon as he settles. My breath hitched in my throat. The air in the cellar, climate controlled to a perfect 55 degrees, suddenly felt Arctic. This wasn't a conversation about wine or business mergers. It was a confirmation. A countdown. Heels clicked sharply against the stone floor, retreating toward the stairs. I pressed my spine against the wooden wine rack, praying the shadows and the bottles would swallow me whole. Through the narrow gaps between 1,000 vintages, I caught a glimpse of her. Tall. Statuesque. Wearing a white silk dress that clung to her like a second skin. Dark hair swept up, exposing a swan-like neck. Bianca Moretti. The woman currently sitting at table 1, playing the role of the adoring fiancé to the man she had just arranged to have slaughtered. She disappeared up the stairs, the heavy door sealing with a soft thud. Her perfume lingered in the chilled air, something expensive, floral, and cloying. It smelled like a funeral arrangement. I stood there for 10 seconds. 15. 20. I was waiting for my legs to remember how to support my own weight. My brain was sprinting, replaying the audio track of what I'd just heard. Table 1 by the glass. 1 at the bar. 3 near the kitchen. Clean shot. When I finally forced myself to move, climbing back up to the main floor, the burlo was forgotten. I stepped back onto the plush carpet of the restaurant floor, and the world seemed to tilt. Everything clicked into focus with a horrifying, high-definition clarity. Table 1. The corner booth. Park Jae-hoon and Bianca Moretti, Chicago's most whispered about power couple. He was the heir to the Korean syndicate, a man whose name was spoken in hushed tones across the city. She was Italian mob royalty. Their engagement had been society page news for months, a union of East and West, a merger of empires. A murder disguised as a romance. Or maybe just a murder disguised as a wedding. I scanned the restaurant with new eyes, my serving tray pressed against my chest like a shield. One man at the bar, mid-30s, wearing a dark suit that didn't fit the vibe of the room. He was nursing a scotch he hadn't actually sipped in 20 minutes. His eyes weren't on the basketball game playing on the muted screen above the spirits. They were fixed on the reflection in the mirror behind the bottles. Watching table 1. 3 men near the kitchen entrance. They had been loitering there for 15 minutes, menus open but never ordering. 2 of them had their backs to the wall, scanning the room. The third kept his right hand tucked inside his jacket, a bulge that definitely wasn't a wallet disrupting the line of his blazer. My heart kicked against my ribs so hard I thought it might crack the bone. I looked back at table 1. Park Jae-hoon was laughing at something Bianca said, a rare, genuine expression that transformed his stoic face. He was completely unaware that the woman touching his forearm with such tenderness had just orchestrated his execution. In less than an hour, when the dessert course arrived and the room was distracted by the flambé, whatever theatrical fire was on tonight's menu, for men were going to put bullets in him. I could walk away. I could clock out early, fake a migraine, say I was sick. I could let whatever was about to happen. Men like Park Jae-hoon didn't end up in my world by accident. He had earned enemies. Maybe he deserved this. But then an image flashed in my mind. My father, Andre, lying in that sterile hospital bed on the south side, hooked up to machines that beeped his life in steady, rhythmic intervals. I thought about every nurse who had stayed 10 minutes late just to hold his hand because I was working a double shift. I thought about every doctor who had fought for him when the insurance company said no. I thought about mercy unearned, unpaid for, and freely given. I thought, I can't just let a human being die. So, I grabbed a receipt from my apron, clicked my pen, and wrote 7 words that would either save his life or end mine. My reflection in the polished wine glasses looked ghost pale as I made my way to table 1. Each step felt like walking through deep water, resistance pressing against my shins. Time stretched and contracted. I was hyper-aware of everything. The scratch of my polyester uniform against my skin, the squeak of my rubber-soled shoes on the marble, the way Bianca's laugh sounded like breaking glass. "You're Glenfiddich, sir." My voice came out steady. Professional. Like I hadn't just overheard a murder plot. Like my hands weren't vibrating with terror. I set the heavy crystal glass down on the white tablecloth, neat and precise. The whiskey caught the candlelight, glowing a deep, dangerous amber. And then I did the thing that every server is trained never ever to do. I touched him. My thumb pressed against the back of his hand as I slid the folded receipt beneath his coaster. The contact lasted maybe half a second, a fleeting warmth, a violation of every rule, every boundary between his world of violence and my world of service. Park Jae-hoon's eyes snapped to mine. They were darker than I expected. Not cold, but calculating. Abyssal. They were the kind of eyes that didn't just look at you. They saw through skin and bone, straight into your intention. His gaze held mine for a beat too long, and I felt something shift in the center of my chest. Not attraction, not yet, but recognition. It was like looking into the eyes of a wild animal that hadn't decided whether to let you pass or tear out your throat. Read it, I mouthed. Please. His fingers curled around the receipt, his palm covering it completely. Is there a problem with the service, darling? Bianca's voice cut through the moment, sweet and poisonous as antifreeze. Jae-hoon's expression didn't change by a millimeter. He lifted his glass, took a slow, deliberate sip of whiskey, and with his other hand, he unfolded the note beneath the table where Bianca couldn't see. I stood there, tray clutched to my chest, watching his face for any reaction. A twitch. A blink. Anything. Nothing. Not a flicker. Not a flinch. Just those dark, obsidian eyes scanning the 7 words I had written. Your fiancé sold you out. They're in position. Then his jaw tightened. Imperceptible unless you were looking for it. The smallest tell. He knew. Jae-hoon set his glass down with a soft clink that somehow cut through the ambient noise of the restaurant like a gunshot. When he spoke, his voice was smooth, controlled, the kind of calm that precedes a hurricane. I'd like to propose a toast. Bianca blinked, her perfect smile flickering with confusion. Now? We haven't even ordered dessert yet, Jay. Now. He gestured to me without looking away from her. Another glass for my fiancé. The same? I hesitated, looking between them. Bianca's perfectly made-up face showed the first hairline crack, a tightness around her eyes, a stiffness in her posture. I already have wine, darling, she said, her voice light but strained. Then you'll have whiskey too. It wasn't a request. It was an order. I walked back to the bar on autopilot, poured the second Glenfiddich with trembling hands, and returned. The restaurant continued its expensive symphony around us, laughter, the clatter of silverware, the soft jazz playing over hidden speakers, completely unaware that Table 1 was a bomb waiting to detonate. I set the glass in front of Bianca. Her red nails gleamed as she reached for it, but Jae-hoon's hand shot out, gripping her wrist. Let's switch, he said softly. I want a drink from your glass. You drink from mine. The temperature at the table seemed to drop 10 degrees. Bianca's laugh came out forced, a brittle sound. That's weird, even for you. Is it? Jae-hoon's smile was a razor blade. I thought couples in love did romantic things like that. Sharing. Trusting. He pushed his glass toward her, holding her gaze with terrifying intensity. Or is there a reason you don't want to drink what I've been drinking? The silence stretched, thick and heavy. I stood there frozen, watching Bianca's face cycle through a kaleidoscope of micro-emotions, confusion, fear, fury, calculation. Finally, she settled on something carefully blank. Of course not. She picked up his glass with a hand that trembled just slightly, a tremor so faint only he and I noticed. To loyalty, Jae-hoon echoed, taking her wine glass. They drank. Nothing happened. The whiskey wasn't poisoned. But Bianca's hesitation, her split-second delay, had confirmed everything he needed to know. Jae-hoon set down the glass and looked directly at me. Really looked at me for the first time, taking in my name tag, my face, the fear I couldn't quite hide. Kenna Lewis, he read slowly, his slight accent turning my name into something foreign and heavy. Tell me, Kenna, do you believe in fate? My throat closed up. I'm not sure, sir. I didn't either. He leaned back in his seat, one arm draped casually over the back of the booth, expanding his chest. Until 45 seconds ago. Bianca's face went white. And that's when I realized I had just started a war. The restaurant continued its expensive symphony around us. The delicate scrape of silver against porcelain, hushed conversations about stocks and summer homes in the Hamptons, the jazz quartet in the corner playing something slow and mournful. But at table 1, time had frozen. Bianca's red nails gleamed against the white tablecloth as she reached for her wine glass, her movements suddenly mechanical, jerky. Jae-hoon sat perfectly still, a predator assessing which direction his prey would bolt. "Kenna," he said my name again, tasting each syllable like he was learning a new language. "How long have you worked here?" My mouth went dry, tasting of panic. 8 months, sir. "And in those 8 months, how many assassination attempts have you witnessed?" The question landed like a slap across the face. Bianca's laugh came out too high, too forced, a sound of pure panic disguised as amusement. "Jay, darling, you're scaring the poor girl. She probably just saw someone suspicious and got nervous." "Is that what happened, Kenna?" His eyes never left mine. They were obsidian in the candlelight, ancient and depthless. "Did you just get nervous?" I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. The receipt was still in his hand, my handwriting stark against the white paper. 7 words that had just painted a target on my back. A subtle shift rippled through the restaurant. One of the men near the kitchen entrance stood up, his hand sliding inside his jacket. At the bar, the man with the untouched scotch turned his body slightly, angling for a better view of our table. Jae-hoon saw it too. I watched the calculation flash across his face, cold, instant, lethal. "I think," he said softly, standing in one fluid movement, buttoning his jacket, "we should discuss this somewhere more private." Bianca's hand shot out, gripping his wrist. "We haven't had dessert yet. I've lost my appetite." He extracted himself from her grasp with surgical precision. Then he turned to me, and his expression shifted into something that made my blood run cold. Fury. Disgust. The mask of an angry customer about to destroy someone's livelihood. His hand closed around my upper arm like a vice. "You," he hissed, loud enough for nearby tables to hear, "spilled whiskey on a $12,000 suit." I hadn't. My tray had been empty. But the lie crystallized instantly, giving him a reason to manhandle me, to drag me away from the table without raising immediate alarm. "I'm so sorry, sir." "Right. Sorry doesn't pay for custom tailoring." He yanked me forward and I stumbled, my hip checking the table edge hard. The violence in his grip was real enough to make me gasp, but theatrical enough to make the other diners look away in second-hand embarrassment. He pulled me toward the kitchen entrance, moving fast. Behind us, I heard Bianca's voice, sharp with rising panic she was trying to disguise as irritation. "Jay, don't be ridiculous. Just send her home. We can. I'm going to speak to her manager." His voice cut through the restaurant like a blade. "And then I'm going to have her fired." We were 10 feet from the kitchen doors. The 3 men who had been loitering near the entrance shifted, hands moving inside jackets. I saw the calculation in their eyes. Was this part of the plan? Was the target moving? 5 feet, Jae-hoon whispered, his voice transforming. The anger vanished, replaced by a cold, tactical focus. His grip on my arm shifted, his fingers finding the pulse point at my wrist. He pressed down, and I felt my heartbeat hammering against his thumb. "When we go through those doors," he murmured, his mouth so close to my ear that anyone watching would think he was berating me, "you run left. Don't stop. Don't look back." The kitchen doors swung open, and the lights went out. Darkness swallowed the gilded lotus whole. Not gradual, not flickering, absolute and instant, like someone had thrown a heavy wool blanket over the sun. The jazz quartet died mid-note. Crystal glasses hit the floor in cascading crashes. A woman screamed, high and piercing. Jae-hoon moved. 1 second, I was standing upright. The next, I was being propelled forward through the kitchen doors with enough force to knock the air from my lungs. The emergency lighting kicked in dim, pulsating red bulbs that turned everything into a nightmare landscape of shadows and blood-colored light. The kitchen was chaos incarnate. Chefs shouted in a babble of languages, Spanish, French, Korean. Pans clattered, sizzled, and dropped. Through the crimson haze, I saw figures moving with a purpose that had nothing to do with cooking. "Left." Jae-hoon's voice cut through the noise. I ran. My cheap, non-slip work shoes skidded on the slick tile as I bolted past the prep stations, past the industrial ovens radiating heat like open furnaces. Behind me came the sickening sound of impact. Flesh on flesh. A grunt of pain. Something metallic skittering across the floor. I risked a glance back. Park Jae-hoon fought like violence was a language he had spoken since birth. A man in a white chef's coat lunged at him with a boning knife, a blade definitely not meant for vegetables. Jae-hoon caught the man's wrist, twisted it with a sickening crunch, and the knife clattered away. He drove his elbow into the man's throat with surgical precision, then spun him into a second attacker hard enough that both men went down in a tangle of limbs. 3 more came through the swinging doors behind him. Not the men from the dining room, these were kitchen staff, or people wearing kitchen whites as camouflage. One of them spotted me. "The girl," he shouted in accented English. "Grab the girl." Terror shot through me like high-voltage electricity. I grabbed the first thing my hand found, a sauté pan of hot oil sitting on the range. Without thinking, without hesitating, I hurled it at him. The oil caught him across the face and chest. His screams were inhuman, primal. He dropped to his knees, clawing at his burning skin. The smell hit me instantly, scorched flesh and hot metal, and my stomach tried to climb up my throat. "Move, Kenna." Jae-hoon was suddenly beside me, his hand finding the small of my back, propelling me forward again. Blood streaked his white dress shirt, vivid red in the emergency lighting. I couldn't tell if it was his or someone else's. We burst through another set of doors into the dry storage area. 50-pound bags of rice and flour were stacked floor to ceiling, creating a claustrophobic maze of narrow passages. The red emergency lighting barely penetrated here, leaving pools of absolute darkness between the shelves. Footsteps thundered behind us. Voices shouted in Italian. Jae-hoon pulled me into a gap between the shelving units, pressing us both flat against the cold concrete wall. The space was so narrow that my chest was crushed against his. My face was buried in the blood-stained fabric of his shirt. He smelled like expensive cologne, copper, and something darker, adrenaline, maybe, or the particular scent of lethal intent. His heart hammered against my forehead. Fast, but steady. Not panicked. Just ready. "How many?" I whispered, my breath fogging against his chest. "Too many." His voice was barely audible, his lips brushing the top of my head as he spoke. The kitchen was full of them. This wasn't just a hit. This was an occupation. 3 men entered the storage area. Their shadows stretched grotesquely across the walls in the red light. They moved methodically, checking between the shelves. Weapons drawn. Not guns, knives, and something that looked like a garrote wire. They wanted this quiet. Jae-hoon's arm wrapped around my waist, holding me so still I wasn't sure I was breathing. His other hand moved to his ankle, and when it came back up, there was a gun in it. Small. Black. Lethal. The nearest man was 5 feet away. 4. 3. I could see his face now in the crimson glow. Young, maybe mid-20s, with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow. He was looking right at our hiding spot. Time stretched. I felt every beat of my heart, every molecule of air moving in and out of my lungs. Jae-hoon's finger rested on the trigger, his body coiled like a steel spring beneath the expensive fabric. The man took another step forward. Then, somewhere in the kitchen, glass shattered, followed by aggressive shouting in Korean. The man's head whipped toward the sound. He gestured to his companions, and all 3 of them moved back toward the kitchen doors. Jae-hoon waited until their footsteps faded before exhaling. The breath moved through his chest, expanding and contracting against mine. For a moment, neither of us moved. We just stood there in the darkness, pressed together by necessity and survival, while chaos raged around us. "Your people," I whispered. "My people." He pulled back slightly, putting an inch of space between us. In the red light, his face looked carved from stone, all sharp angles and shadows. A cut above his eyebrow leaked blood down the side of his face, making him look like a fallen angel. "They'll create a distraction. But we need to move now. The back exit is compromised," a voice said from behind us. We spun. A man stood blocking the path to the rear door, backlit by the emergency lighting. He was massive, easily 6'4", built like he'd been carved from the side of a mountain. He was pointing a suppressed pistol directly at my head. "Han," Jae-hoon said. And there was something in his voice I couldn't read. Not fear. Recognition, maybe? Or betrayal. "Sorry, boss." The big man's expression was carefully neutral. "Orders from the top." Woojin. The name came out like a curse. "Your brother sends his regards," Han said. "And his regrets." "Nothing personal." Han's finger tightened on the trigger. Jae-hoon moved faster than physics should have allowed. He grabbed a 50-pound bag of rice from the nearest shelf and hurled it at Han's head. The bag exploded on impact, sending millions of white grains everywhere, creating a bizarre snow globe effect in the red light. Han fired blind. Pfft. The suppressed shot went wide, punching into the shelving. Then I was on the floor. Jae-hoon's body covered mine as bullets punched through rice bags and sent white powder cascading down like rain above us. Wood splintered. Metal pinged. The world was gunfire and screaming, and the weight of Jae-hoon's body pressing me into the cold concrete. "Stay down," he growled against my ear. Then he was rolling off me, returning fire. The muzzle flash from his gun lit up the storage room in strobing bursts of white light. Han went down. Not dead, but hit. He clutched his shoulder, his weapon clattering away across the floor. Two more men came through the kitchen doors, and suddenly it was a storm of bullets. I pressed myself flat against the floor, hands over my head, rice grains digging into my palms as they rained down. Something hot grazed my upper arm. Not a bullet, but close enough to burn. The shock of pain made me gasp. "The back door." "No." Jae-hoon's hand found mine, yanking me to my feet. We ran, stumbling through rice that crunched beneath our shoes like snow. The back door loomed ahead, metal, industrial, marked with a glowing green exit sign. Jae-hoon hit it at full speed, using his shoulder like a battering ram. The door exploded open. And then we were outside. Chicago's winter slammed into us like a freight train. The temperature had to be 10 below zero. The wind screamed through the alley with enough force to steal the breath from my lungs. Snow swirled in frantic spirals, turning the world into a whiteout that was the polar opposite of the restaurant's golden warmth. My server uniform, a thin polyester blouse and slacks designed for climate-controlled elegance, was criminally inadequate. Within seconds, the wind cut through to my skin, turning my sweat to ice. My teeth started chattering so hard I bit my tongue. Jae-hoon didn't slow down. He pulled me down the alley, our shoes crunching through dirty snow and black ice. Behind us, the back door banged open again. Voices shouted. A black SUV sat at the alley's mouth, engine running, exhaust creating ghosts in the freezing air. Jae-hoon wrenched open the back door and physically threw me inside. I landed on leather seats that smelled like new car and gun oil. He dove in after me, slamming the door. "Drive," he barked in Korean to the man behind the wheel. The SUV lurched forward, tires spinning on ice for a terrifying second before finding purchase. Through the rear window, I saw figures spilling out of the restaurant's back door. Too many to count. Weapons raised. One of them aimed at our vehicle. The rear windshield spiderwebbed, but didn't break. Bulletproof glass. The sound of impact was dull, distant, like someone tapping on a fish tank. We sped away, leaving the gilded Lotus behind in a blur of snow and muzzle flash. Inside the SUV, silence descended. The only sounds were our ragged breathing and the whisper of tires on icy pavement. Jae-hoon leaned forward, speaking rapid Korean to the driver, instructions, coordinates, I couldn't tell. Blood dripped from the cut above his eyebrow, spattering onto the pristine leather seat. I looked down at myself. Rice grains clung to my clothes and hair like pathetic confetti. My arm burned where something had grazed it. The sleeve of my blouse was torn and spotted with blood. My hands trembled, not from cold anymore, but from pure adrenaline crash. "You're hurt," Jae-hoon said, his attention snapping back to me. His English returned, slightly accented but perfect. "I'm fine. You're bleeding. So are you." He wiped blood from his eyebrow with the back of his hand, barely acknowledging it. Then his fingers were on my arm, examining the wound with a clinical detachment that somehow felt more intimate than concern. His touch was surprisingly gentle, considering those same hands had just killed multiple people with ruthless efficiency. "Grace," he pronounced. "You were lucky." "Lucky?" I laughed, and it came out slightly hysterical. "I just burned a man's face off with hot oil and got shot at in a rice storage room. That's your definition of lucky. You're alive." His dark eyes met mine, and something shifted in them. A microscopic crack in the ice. "That's the only definition that matters." The driver said something in Korean. Jae-hoon responded, then turned back to me. "We're going somewhere safe. Somewhere they won't look for us tonight." "They? You mean Bianca and whoever Woo-jin is?" His jaw tightened at the name. "My half-brother. Older by 2 years. Meaner by a lifetime." I thought he was dead. Apparently, I was misinformed. "And Bianca?" "She was his from the beginning. I suspect the whole engagement was a setup. A way to get close enough to kill me without raising suspicion." He said it with such cold pragmatism, like discussing a failed business transaction rather than the woman he had been planning to marry. The pregnancy was probably his too. Pregnancy? Insurance. In case she couldn't pull off the hit. A park heir to legitimize his claim to the family empire. The casual way he dissected the betrayal made my skin prickle. This was a man who saw threats and contingencies, who measured relationships in terms of leverage and risk. And I had just become a variable in his deadly equation. "Where are you taking me?" The question came out smaller than I intended. Jae-hoon studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable in the passing streetlights. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft, almost kind, which somehow made it more terrifying. "Home." Home was not a word I would have used. Prison, maybe. Fortress, definitely. The stronghold sat on a promontory overlooking Lake Michigan, surrounded by walls that looked designed to keep out armies. As we passed through 2 separate security checkpoints, both requiring retinal scans and codes that the driver rattled off in Korean, I watched the safe, familiar world of Chicago disappear behind us, replaced by something colder and more absolute. The mansion itself was pure brutalism. Concrete and glass. All harsh angles and uncompromising lines. No warmth. No softness. Just power rendered in architecture. Floodlights illuminated the perimeter, turning the falling snow into a blizzard of white static against the darkness. We pulled into an underground garage that looked like it could house a small military unit. The SUV's engine cut, and suddenly the silence was oppressive. Jae-hoon exited the vehicle with the fluid grace of someone who had never questioned his right to command space. I followed on legs that felt detached from my body, adrenaline finally giving way to bone-deep exhaustion. The elevator required a key card and a fingerprint scan. The ride-up was smooth, silent, the LED display counting floors and Korean characters I couldn't read. Jae-hoon stood beside me, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. A sharp contrast to the cold concrete surrounding us. "You're shaking," he observed. "I'm freezing." He shrugged off his ruined suit jacket and draped it over my shoulders. It was still warm from his body, and it smelled like him. That expensive cologne, now mixed with gunpowder and adrenaline and blood. I pulled it tighter, hating how good it felt, hating how my body responded to even this small gesture of care from a man who was essentially my captor. The elevator opened directly into the penthouse. Not a hallway, not a foyer, just straight into a living space that was more museum than home. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the lake, black water stretching to an invisible horizon. The furniture was minimal, expensive, arranged with geometric precision. Everything was gray. Concrete floors, steel fixtures, slate-colored upholstery. Even the art on the walls was monochromatic, abstract slashes of charcoal on white canvas. It was beautiful the way a knife is beautiful. Cold. Sharp. Dangerous. 3 men waited in the living room, all wearing black tactical gear, all armed. They straightened when Jae-hoon entered, speaking in rapid Korean reports. I assumed the news was bad from the way Jae-hoon's expression darkened with each sentence. He barked orders, dismissive and absolute, and 2 of the men left immediately. The 3rd approached me, holding out his hand. "Phone." I blinked. "What?" "Your phone," Jae-hoon translated, his voice flat. "Give it to him." Why? Because I said so. The casualness of his dominance sent a spike of anger through my exhaustion. I need to call my father. Tell him I'm okay. He'll be worried. Your father is fine. Jae-hoon moved to a sideboard, poured amber liquid into a crystal glass. I had my people check on him 20 minutes ago. He's asleep in his hospital bed, completely unaware that his daughter just participated in a shootout. That doesn't mean I don't need to phone him. Kenna. He didn't raise his voice, but the command in it was absolute. Now. I wanted to refuse. I wanted to tell him to go to hell, that he had no right to strip me of my one connection to the outside world. But the man in tactical gear was still waiting, hand outstretched, and Jae-hoon was watching me with those obsidian eyes that saw everything, calculated everything. I pulled my phone from my apron pocket, surprised it had survived the chaos, and placed it in the man's palm. He took it without a word and left. The elevator doors closed behind him, and suddenly it was just Park Jae-hoon and me in all that gray space. You can't keep me here, I said, trying to sound defiant and not terrified. Can't I? He took a slow sip of his drink, regarding me over the rim of the glass. What exactly is your alternative, Kenna? Walk out into the snow and hope the Moretti family doesn't find you? Go home to your apartment and wait for someone to put a bullet through your door. I didn't do anything wrong. You saved my life. In the world I live in, that makes you either very valuable or very dangerous. Sometimes both. He set down his glass and moved toward me. Each step measured and predatory. The people who tried to kill me tonight don't care that you were just an innocent bystander. All they care about is that you cost them money, power, and reputation. And they will want to know exactly how much you saw, how much you heard, and whether you're going to become a problem. He stopped inches away, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. This close, I could see the flecks of gold hidden in his irises, the faint scar bisecting his left eyebrow, the way his pulse beat in his throat despite his calm exterior. So, no, he continued softly. You can't leave. Not tonight. Not until I figure out how to keep you alive. By making me your prisoner? By making you my responsibility. Something flickered across his face. Too fast to read. Too complex to name. There's a difference, he said. Not from where I'm standing. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. You're very brave for someone who served appetizers 2 hours ago. And you're very arrogant for someone who almost died tonight. The smile widened fractionally. Almost doesn't count in my business. You either survive or you don't. There's no participation trophy for nearly getting assassinated. Despite everything, the fear, the exhaustion, the complete insanity of my situation, I almost laughed. The sound died in my throat when his hand came up, fingers brushing my jaw with unexpected gentleness. He tilted my face toward the light, examining the cut on my arm, the rice grains still tangled in my hair, the way my whole body trembled despite his jacket wrapped around me. You need to clean up, he said. And eat something. Then we'll talk. Talk about what? About why you saved me. About what happens next. About? He stopped, his thumb pressed against the pulse point in my neck, feeling my heartbeat jackrabbit beneath his touch. About why you're looking at me like that. Like what? Like you can't decide if you want to kill me or kiss me. The accusation hung in the air between us. Dangerous. And true. Because he was right. Somewhere in the chaos and adrenaline and terror, something had shifted. Something that had nothing to do with gratitude or Stockholm Syndrome, and everything to do with the way his body had covered mine on that storage room floor. The way he had killed for me without hesitation. The way he was looking at me now, like I was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. I don't want to do either, I lied. Liar. But he stepped back, releasing me. And the absence of his touch felt like a physical loss. Third door on the right. There's a bathroom, clean clothes in the closet. Take your time. I fled. There was no other word for it. I walked quickly toward the hallway he'd indicated, feeling the weight of his gaze tracking me the entire way like a physical touch. The third door opened into a guest suite that was larger than my entire apartment in South Shore. A king-sized bed dressed in slate gray linens dominated the room, flanked by a sitting area with a view of the lake that was nothing short of breathtaking. The bathroom looked like something ripped from the pages of Architectural Digest, all polished stone, rainfall shower heads, and minimalist vanity lighting. I locked the door behind me, the click of the latch echoing in the silence. Then I immediately felt foolish. If Park Jae-hoon wanted to come in, a flimsy privacy lock wouldn't stop him. Nothing would stop him. This was his fortress, his kingdom, and I was just a subject he hadn't decided what to do with yet. The bathroom mirror showed me a stranger. My hair had come loose from its practical server's bun, wild curls falling around my face, studded with dried rice grains like mock pearls. Blood had dried on my sleeve, turning from vibrant crimson to a rusty, flaking brown. My eyes looked too large, too dark, the eyes of someone who had just watched the veil of civilization get ripped away to reveal the violence underneath. I stripped off my ruined uniform, the polyester blouse, the stained slacks, and stepped into the shower. The water came out scalding hot immediately. No waiting, no sputtering, just perfect, blister-inducing temperature at the turn of a chrome dial. It felt obscene, this casual luxury, while my father lay in a hospital bed downtown, hooked to machines that counted his heartbeats like dwindling coins. I stood under the spray and let myself cry. Just for a minute. Just long enough to let the terror and confusion and bone-deep exhaustion escape in hiccuping sobs that the water washed away before they could make a sound. Then I stopped. Because crying wouldn't change the math. I was here. Jae-hoon was right. Going home would be suicide. And somewhere in this city, people who wanted me dead were regrouping, planning, waiting. When I finally emerged, wrapped in a towel that felt softer than clouds, I found the clothes Jae-hoon had mentioned. Not designer suits or uncomfortable dresses, but simple, high-quality basics. Heavy sweatpants, a thermal Henley, thick wool socks. Men's sizes, but someone had thoughtfully left a belt. I dressed quickly, towel-dried my hair until it was a damp halo around my face, and stared at my reflection again. Still a stranger, but a cleaner one. Less terrified. More determined. I was leaving the bathroom when I heard it. Voices from the main room. Speaking in rapid-fire Korean. Jae-hoon's voice was controlled, cold, low. And then another voice, younger and crackling through what sounded like a speakerphone. The conversation was tense, punctuated by long, heavy silences. I crept closer to the door, pressing my ear against the wood like a spy in my own drama. The Korean was too fast for me to catch any actual words, but I understood tone. The person on the phone was taunting him, goading him, and Jae-hoon was listening with the patience of a man planning a massacre. Then I heard a name that stopped my heart. Woo-jin. And another. Bianca. And a third word that I understood without translation, because English had bled into the conversation. Pregnant. The call ended with a sharp command from Jae-hoon. Something shattered, glass hitting a wall, probably. Then silence. I waited a full minute before opening the door. Jae-hoon stood by the panoramic windows, one hand braced against the glass, looking out at the black void of the lake. He had changed clothes too. Black tactical pants, a fitted black t-shirt, still barefoot. The cut above his eyebrow had been cleaned and bandaged with a sterile strip. He didn't turn when I entered, but his voice carried across the space, devoid of emotion. Woo-jin sends his regards. And his regrets. I moved closer, careful not to startle him, though I suspected this man was never truly startled. Your brother. Half-brother. Son of my father's first marriage, before he married my mother. Jae-hoon's reflection in the glass looked like a ghost, transparent and weary. Woo-jin was the heir. The golden child. Until he made the mistake of thinking he could steal from the family without consequences. What did he do? He siphoned $2 million in product. Sold it to a rival gang in Macau. My father gave him a choice, exile or execution. Woo-jin chose exile. He disappeared into China 5 years ago. Jae-hoon finally turned to face me. Everyone thought he died there. Wishful thinking, apparently. And Bianca? Bianca was his lover long before she became my fiancée. The revelation hung in the air, heavy and gross. The pregnancy is his, Jae-hoon continued, his voice flat. Genetic testing confirmed it months ago. I blinked, processing the timeline. You knew? You knew she was pregnant with another man's child, and you were still going to marry her. It's business, Kenna. Power. Alliances. territory. Love has nothing to do with it. He walked over to the shattered remains of his glass on the floor, nudging a shard with his toe. I knew she was pregnant. She'd done the test at barely 6 weeks. Early enough for it to go unnoticed by the public. Early enough for me to confirm the child wasn't mine. I was going to use it as leverage after the wedding to control the Moretti family. He looked up, and his eyes were terrifyingly empty. I just didn't know the father was my brother. I didn't know he was still alive to orchestrate a coup. The clinical way he dissected it made my chest ache. So, the wedding was a trap. From the beginning. A way to get me in the open. A way to consolidate the Korean and Italian factions under Woo Jin's banner once I was dead. But betrayal. I whispered. That's personal. And what they did tonight, killing my men, trying to kill me, putting you in danger, that demands a response. What kind of response? His smile was a blade, sharp enough to draw blood. The kind that ends with my brother's empire burning and Bianca in the ground beside him. The casual promise of violence should have terrified me. Should have sent me running back to that locked bedroom. Should have made me beg him to let me go, to leave me out of whatever war he was planning. Instead, I heard myself ask, "What do you need me to do?" Jae-hoon's expression shifted. Surprise. Calculation. Something that might have been respect. You want to help me? I want my father safe. I want to go home without looking over my shoulder. And I stopped, surprised by the truth of what came next. I want them to pay for what they did tonight. For the people they killed. For the life you would have lost if I hadn't been in that wine cellar at exactly the wrong time. He moved closer, each step deliberate, until we were standing in the same charged space we'd occupied earlier. You're not what I expected, Kenna Lewis. What did you expect? Tears. Hysterics. Demands to be released. His hand came up, fingers brushing a damp curl away from my face. Not offers to join a war against the Italian mob. I'm full of surprises. So I'm learning. His thumb traced the line of my jaw, the touch feather-light but possessive. But understand this. If you stay, if you help me, there's no going back to your old life. The moment you walked up to that table with a note, you stepped into my world. And my world doesn't let people go. The warning should have scared me. Should have made me recoil. But I'd watched him fight tonight. Watched him kill without hesitation to protect me. And I'd felt something in that storage room, pressed between his body and the concrete floor while bullets flew overhead. Not just fear. Not just adrenaline. But recognition. Like my soul had been waiting my entire life to meet someone just as trapped by circumstances, just as desperate to survive. Then I guess I'm not going back, I whispered. His eyes darkened with something that might have been triumph, might have been desire, might have been the recognition that we were both walking into something we couldn't control. No, he agreed softly. I guess you're not. Before we continue deeper into this nightmare, stop what you're doing. If you are loving the tension, the danger, and the chemistry between Kenna and Mr. Park, you need to smash that subscribe button right now. Do not let this story end here for you. Join the family, turn on those notifications so you're the first to know who survives the night. Comment, "I'm in," if you're ready for the next twist. I woke to the sound of alarms screaming through the concrete fortress. The bedroom was still dark, but red emergency lights strobed through the windows, turning everything into a horror movie sequence. I bolted upright, heart already hammering before my brain fully processed what was happening. The door slammed open. Jae-hoon filled the frame. No longer barefoot, no longer relaxed. He was dressed in full tactical gear, vest, holster, boots, with a gun in each hand. His face was a mask of fury. "Get up. Now." I stumbled out of bed, still wearing the borrowed sweatpants and thermal shirt. "What's happening?" "We're compromised." He grabbed my wrist, dragging me toward the door with zero gentleness. "They found us." "That's impossible. We just got here." Apparently not impossible enough. We were moving fast through the penthouse. Jae-hoon's grip on my wrist was bruising. Other men in tactical gear appeared from doorways, speaking rapid Korean, weapons raised. Jae-hoon barked orders, dismissive and absolute, then pulled me into the elevator. The descent felt eternal. Jae-hoon stood rigid beside me, jaw clenched, fury radiating off him in palpable waves. When the doors opened into the garage, chaos greeted us. SUVs were being loaded, men were running, someone was shouting coordinates. How did they find us? I asked, my voice small in all that controlled panic. Jae-hoon didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on something across the garage. A man in a white lab coat, a doctor or technician, was holding a tablet, pointing at the screen and speaking urgently in Korean. Then, Jae-hoon's gaze swung to me. And what I saw there froze my blood. Suspicion. Cold, calculating suspicion. You, he said softly. And that softness was more terrifying than any shout. You led them here. What? No. Search her. The order cracked like a whip. 2 men appeared, hands professionally impersonal as they patted me down. I stood there, humiliated and terrified, while they checked every pocket, every seam. Looking for what? A wire? A tracking device? Clear, one of them reported in English. Then how? Jae-hoon grabbed my shoulders, and his grip was iron. He shook me, just once, hard. How did they find us? Kenna, who did you call? What did you do? Nothing. I swear I didn't do anything. Tears burned my eyes, rage and fear in equal measure. You took my phone, remember? You locked me in a bedroom. What exactly do you think I could have done? The man with the tablet approached, speaking urgently in Korean. He held up the screen, showing a GPS map with a blinking red dot. Jae-hoon's eyes narrowed, then widened fractionally. He looked at me, then at the tablet, then back at me. When did you last see your father? The non sequitur threw me. Yesterday. Why? Did you pick up his medication? Yes. From the pharmacy on 42nd Street. I picked it up on my lunch break today because understanding crashed over me like ice water. Oh my God. Jae-hoon was already moving, pulling me toward one of the armored SUVs. Get in. Now. What does my father's medication have to do with? He shoved me into the back seat, then slid in beside me. The driver took off before Jae-hoon even closed the heavy door. The insulin you picked up yesterday, Jae-hoon said, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. It was tagged. They put a tracker in the packaging. But I didn't bring it here. It's at home. In my apartment. I stopped. Isn't it? The man with the tablet was in the front passenger seat. He turned, holding up a plastic evidence bag. Inside was a small, crushed cardboard box. Pharmaceutical packaging with Andre Lewis printed on the label. My father's insulin. Your purse, Jae-hoon said flatly. It was in the car from the restaurant. The insulin was in your purse. Memory crashed back. Grabbing my bag from my locker during my break. The insulin box I'd picked up during my lunch hour, planning to drop it off at the hospital after my shift. I had completely forgotten about it in the chaos of the night. I didn't know, I whispered. I swear. I didn't know. The Morettis did. Jae-hoon's jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscles jumping beneath his skin. They tagged the medication days ago. Anticipating you might become a loose end because you worked at the Lotus. Even before tonight, they were covering contingencies. The horror of it settled in. The GPS tracker in the insulin box. The Morettis tracking my movements. And I had led them straight to Jae-hoon's safe house like a bloodhound following a scent trail I couldn't even see. I'm sorry, I said, and the words felt pathetically inadequate. I didn't mean to. Didn't mean to? Jae-hoon laughed, but it was a broken sound edged with darkness. Do you have any idea how many people are dead right now because you didn't mean to? How many of my men were in that building when the breach happened? I said I was sorry. Sorry doesn't bring them back. He grabbed my wrist, yanking me forward. And I saw the gun in his other hand. Black. Heavy. Pointed at the floor, but oh so close to not being pointed at the floor. The driver said something sharp in Korean, a warning, a plea? Jae-hoon ignored him. Give me one reason, he said softly, leaning in until our noses were almost touching. Why I shouldn't put a bullet in you right now. Terror locked my throat. This was it. This was how it ended. Not in a restaurant shootout or a storage room brawl, but in the back of a speeding SUV because I had been too stupid, too naive to realize I was carrying my own tracking device. But beneath the terror was something else. Something angry and defiant and tired of being afraid. Because my father didn't ask for any of this. The words exploded out of me, raw and jagged. Because he's lying in a hospital bed right now with machines breathing for him. And if I die, he doesn't get his next dose. I grabbed his wrist, the one holding the gun, and forced the barrel against my own chest. Right over my heart. Because you can kill me, Jae-hoon. But that doesn't solve your problem. That doesn't stop your brother. That doesn't bring your men back. His finger rested on the trigger. His eyes were wild. It might make me feel better. Then do it. I stared into those obsidian eyes. Put the bullet in my heart. But before you do, send someone to 42nd Street, room 304. Make sure Andre Lewis gets his insulin. Because he's the only innocent person in this entire mess. We stared at each other, both breathing hard. The gun pressed between us like a promise or a threat. Outside the SUV windows, Chicago blurred past streetlights, storefronts, the ordinary world continuing while my life hung suspended in the space of a trigger pull. The man with the tablet spoke again, urgent and pleading. Jae-hoon's eyes never left mine. What did he say? I whispered. He said the tracker's been destroyed. We're clean now. No one is following us. Good. He also said I'm an idiot if I kill the only witness who can identify Bianca's voice. Who can confirm the details of the plot? Who can testify if this ever goes legal? Am I going to testify? You're going to do whatever keeps you alive. He lowered the gun slowly. The absence of its pressure against my chest felt like I could finally breathe, but the phantom weight remained. And what keeps you alive, he said, holstering the weapon, is being useful to me. Then use me. The words came out stronger than I felt. Stop waving that gun around and use me. I heard Bianca in that wine cellar. I heard names, times, locations. I can tell you everything if you stop threatening to blow my head off long enough to listen. Something shifted in his expression. The rage banking slightly, calculation returning. He released my wrist, and I saw the marks his fingers had left, red impressions that would bloom into bruises by morning. Your father, he said quietly. The hospital on 42nd Street. Yes. Jae-hoon pulled out his phone, spoke in rapid Korean. I heard my father's name. Heard the address. Heard what sounded like detailed medical instructions. When he hung up, his eyes found mine again. I've sent a team. They'll make sure he gets his medication. Round-the-clock protection. The best doctors money can buy. Relief hit me so hard my vision blurred. Thank you. Don't thank me. He gestured to the driver, who nodded and changed course, the SUV banking hard. I bought his medical debt 3 months ago. The hospital he's in? It's mine. Has been for years. Money laundering, shell companies, the usual. The relief curdled into something colder in my stomach. What? I own the building, Kenna. I own the equipment keeping him alive. I own his debt, his treatment, his next breath. Jae-hoon's expression was carved from ice. Which means I own you. He leaned back, adjusting his cuffs. Not because I'm cruel, but because that's how leverage works in my world. The truth settled over me like a lead weight. He hadn't saved my father out of kindness. He had done it out of strategy. Keeping me compliant. Keeping me grateful. Keeping me exactly where he needed me. You bastard, I whispered. Yes. He didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. But I'm the bastard keeping your father alive. So perhaps save the moral outrage for someone who cares. I wanted to hit him. Wanted to claw at that perfect face, make him bleed the way he had just made my hope bleed. But he was right. Hating him didn't change the math. My father's life was in his hands, literally and figuratively. The SUV pulled into a second underground parking structure. This one was different, more industrial, damp, smelling of rust and old water. We exited into a building that felt temporary. Functional. A safe house, not a home. Jae-hoon led me to a second-floor room. It had a single bed, a metal chair, and bars on the windows. Not quite a cell, but close enough to make the distinction irrelevant. Stay here, he ordered. Someone will bring food. Don't try to leave. Or what? You'll kill my father. He paused in the doorway, his back to me. No, I'll kill you. And then your father dies anyway when the machines get unplugged because there's no one left to pay his bills. The door closed. A lock clicked. I stood in the middle of that bare room and felt the full weight of my situation crash down. I was trapped. My father was a bargaining chip. And the man I had saved tonight, the man whose eyes I had felt drawn to, had just revealed himself to be exactly what everyone assumed he was. A monster who measured lives in terms of utility and discarded them when the math no longer worked. I sank onto the bed, buried my face in my hands, and tried very hard not to scream. I must have fallen asleep eventually, exhaustion winning a war of attrition against my fear. When I woke, gray light filtered through the barred windows, painting stripes across the floor like a sundial of captivity. Someone had left a tray of food on the chair, rice, soup, tea. All cold now. A congealed offering. I ate mechanically, tasting nothing but ash, then sat staring at those bars until the light shifted from slate gray to a pale, watery gold. The lock clicked around noon. Jae-hoon entered carrying a first aid kit, his expression unreadable. He had changed again, simple black tactical pants and a gray Henley that clung to his shoulders, making his eyes look even darker. The bandage above his eyebrow was gone, revealing a thin, angry red cut that would definitely scar. "How's your arm?" he asked, as if he hadn't threatened to execute me 12 hours ago. "Fine. Let me see." I said it's fine. He crossed the room in 3 long strides, the movement eating up the space between us. He grabbed my wrist, not roughly, but with an inevitability that made resistance pointless, and pushed up my sleeve. The grays from the storage room had scabbed over, angry and inflamed at the edges, but not infected. He examined it with clinical detachment, then flipped open the first aid kit. "I can do it myself," I snapped, trying to pull away. "Sit still." His fingers were surprisingly gentle as he cleaned the wound with an antiseptic wipe that stung like fire. I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted copper, refusing to wince, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing my pain. When he applied a fresh bandage, his touch lingered for a moment on the bruises his own grip had left earlier. "I shouldn't have grabbed you like that," he said quietly, his eyes fixed on the purple marks on my skin. "In the car." "It wasn't." He trailed off. "It wasn't necessary." It wasn't quite an apology, but from a man like Park Jae-hoon, it was probably as close as I was going to get. "You thought I betrayed you," I said. "I get it. You don't react well to betrayal." "Apparently not." I pulled my arm back, reclaiming my space. "Is that what happened with your brother? He betrayed you, so your father exiled him." Jae-hoon's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping beneath the skin. Woo Jin stole from the family. 2 million in product, sold to a rival gang. My father gave him a choice, exile or execution. Woo Jin chose exile and disappeared into China. We thought that was the end of it. But it wasn't. Clearly. He stood, pacing to the window. The bars cast shadows across his face, dissecting his features. He's been planning this for years. Building alliances. Turning my own people against me. Seducing Bianca into a scheme. And I was blind to all of it. You can't blame yourself for trusting your fiancée. I didn't trust her. I barely knew her. He turned back to me. The engagement was arranged. Park family money and connections for Moretti family territory and soldiers. A business merger with a wedding cake. He looked at me, and his expression was hollowed out by exhaustion. That's what my world is, Kenna. Transactions disguised as relationships. Marriages that are really just hostile takeovers. Love is a liability I can't afford. The bitterness in his voice made something in my chest ache, despite my anger. That sounds lonely. Lonely is safe. Lonely doesn't get you killed. Lonely also doesn't give you a reason to survive. He studied me for a long moment, something shifting behind his eyes. Is that why you saved me? Because you thought I needed a reason. I saved you because letting someone die when I could prevent it felt worse than the risk of trying. Even though that risk put me here, locked in a room, dependent on a monster who owns my father's life support. I don't think you believe I'm a monster. Then you're dangerously naive. Or maybe you're not as monstrous as you want me to believe. I stood, moving closer until only a few feet separated us. Monsters don't tend to their captives' wounds. They don't make sure dying men get their medication. They don't hesitate with the trigger when someone gives them permission to pull it. I was angry. That doesn't make me good. No. But the fact that you're standing here right now, having this conversation instead of leaving me to rot, suggests you're not entirely evil either. The silence stretched between us, heavy with things neither of us knew how to name. Outside, I could hear city sounds, traffic, sirens, the ordinary chaos of Chicago continuing while we stood frozen in this moment. Your father, Jae-hoon said finally. I had my people move him to a private suite. Better equipment. Better doctors. Round-the-clock care. The kindness of it, or the strategic manipulation, I still couldn't tell which, made my throat tight. Why? Because you were right. He's innocent in this. He paused, looking uncomfortable. And because. Because what? Because you asked me to. And I find I have a difficult time saying no to you. The confession hung in the air. Dangerous. Electric. This close, I could see the exhaustion etched into his face, the shadow of sleeplessness under his eyes. He looked almost human. Almost vulnerable. Let me see him, I said softly. My father. Let me visit him, make sure he's okay, and I'll tell you everything I heard in that wine cellar. Every word Bianca said. Every name. Every detail. Jae-hoon's eyes narrowed. You're bargaining with me. You're the one who said leverage is everything in your world. So here's my leverage. I have information you need, and you have access to the person I love most. Seems like a fair trade. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. You're learning. I'm a fast learner. So I'm noticing. He pulled out his phone, typed something quickly, then pocketed it. Done. A car will take you to the hospital this afternoon. My people will accompany you. For your safety. You mean to make sure I don't run? That too. He moved toward the door, then paused, his hand on the handle. For what it's worth, Kenna. I'm glad you were in that wine cellar. I'm glad you wrote that note. And I'm glad you're too stubborn to stay afraid of me. I am afraid of you. But I'm here anyway. That takes a particular kind of courage. His gaze held mine, intense and unreadable. Or a particular kind of madness. I haven't decided which yet. The door closed behind him. But this time, the lock didn't click. I stared at that unlocked door for a long time, weighing my options. I could leave. I could walk out, find a phone, call the police. But Jae-hoon was right. The Morettas wouldn't stop looking for me. And leaving meant abandoning my father to machines that would get unplugged the moment I became more trouble than I was worth. So I stayed. Not because I had to, but because leaving meant losing the only family I had left. And because some small, traitorous part of me wanted to understand the man who had held a gun to my chest one moment and bandaged my wounds the next. Late afternoon arrived, and true to his word, Jae-hoon had a car waiting. 2 guards accompanied me, silent, professional, armed. The drive to the hospital was quiet, the city passing by outside the windows like a movie I was no longer part of. The private suite Jae-hoon had moved my father to was on the top floor. Corner room. Views of the city. Equipment that looked like it belonged in a science fiction film. My father lay in the bed exactly as I'd left him, gray-haired and thin, chest rising and falling with mechanical precision. Monitors tracked every heartbeat. He had been in a medically induced coma for weeks. The doctors were unsure if he would ever wake. I pulled a chair close and took his hand. It was warm, but there was no answering squeeze. No flicker of recognition. Just the steady beep-beep-beep of machines and the whisper of the ventilator breathing for him. Hey, Daddy, I whispered. I'm sorry I haven't visited in a few days. Things got complicated. Complicated? What an absurd understatement for watching people die, for being held at gunpoint, for falling into a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I told him about the restaurant, leaving out the violence. I told him about meeting someone who reminded me of him, stubborn, proud, trapped by circumstances beyond his control. I told him I was trying to do the right thing, even when the right thing was terrifying. And I promised him I'd get us both out of this somehow. When I finally left, the sun was setting, painting the city in shades of blood and gold. Jae-hoon was waiting in the lobby, hands in his pockets, looking like any other visitor rather than the crime lord he was. How is he asked. The same. But the equipment you provided, it's helping. The doctor said his vitals are more stable than they've been in months. Good. He fell into step beside me as we walked to the waiting car. Now, your turn. Tell me everything you heard in that wine cellar. So I did. The Italian phrases. The timeline. The locations. The switch to that other language. Russian, he confirmed, nodding. Woojin has contacts in Moscow. I told him about the specific references to the bar, the kitchen, the sniper position. Every detail I could remember, I gave him. Jaehoon listened without interrupting, his expression darkening with each revelation. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. Woojin's been planning this for at least a year, he said finally. Maybe longer. The level of detail, the coordination, that's not something you throw together in a few months. What are you going to do? His smile was cold and sharp as a blade. I'm going to burn his entire operation to the ground. Starting with the wedding. Wedding. Woojin is consolidating power by marrying Bianca, combining the Korean and Italian factions under one banner. The ceremony is in 3 days at the Moretti estate. Jaehoon's eyes met mine, and what I saw there sent ice through my veins. And you and I are going to crash it. Before we get to the training montage that changes everything, I need to remind you, if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? This story is about to shift from survival to revenge, and things are going to get very, very dark. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and tell me in the comments, do you trust Jaehoon? Because Kenna is about to put her life in his hands. The Stronghold's basement training facility smelled like gun oil, concrete dust, and sweat. Jaehoon had led me down there at dawn, when the city was still sleeping and the lake outside churned gray and restless. He stood behind a table covered in weapons, sorting through them with the efficiency of someone who had done this 1,000 times. His hair was still damp from the shower, falling across his forehead in a way that made him look younger, less terrifying. If you're going to survive what's coming, he said without looking at me, you need to know how to protect yourself. I crossed my arms, the tactical pants and fitted black shirt feeling strange against my skin. I thought that's what your army of guards was for. My guards can't be everywhere. And if last night taught us anything, it's that nowhere is truly safe. He picked up a compact pistol, checked the chamber with practiced movements. Besides, I'm not interested in keeping you helpless. Just trapped. His eyes flicked to mine, something dark moving through them. If you want to leave, the door is unlocked. I told you that. And your father will continue to receive the best care available. I meant what I said, Kenna. You're not my prisoner. You're my what? I challenged, moving closer. What exactly am I? Your asset? Your informant? Your convenient witness? My responsibility. The word came out rough, like it hurt to say. You saved my life. That creates a debt I take seriously. Even though I was ready to blow your head off 12 hours ago. A muscle jumped in his jaw. I was wrong. I don't apologize often, but I'm apologizing now. I should have trusted my instincts about you instead of my paranoia. The admission hung between us, unexpected and vulnerable. This close, I could see the exhaustion etched into his face, the weight he carried in the set of his shoulders. He looked like a man fighting a war on every front, including against himself. Your instincts told you to trust me? I asked softly. From the moment you pressed that note into my hand. His gaze held mine, intense enough to burn. Everything in my training said you were a threat. But my gut said you were something else entirely. What? A miracle. Or a curse. He said it like a confession. I haven't decided which yet. The air between us felt charged. Dangerous. I should have stepped back. I should have maintained distance. I should have remembered that this man was a killer who had held a gun to my chest. But instead, I found myself moving forward, closing the gap until I could feel the heat radiating from his body. Teach me, I said. If I'm going to be part of whatever war you're planning, teach me how to survive it. Something shifted in his expression. Respect, maybe. Or desire. Or both, tangled together. It won't be easy. I didn't ask for easy. I asked for useful. The corner of his mouth lifted. Almost a smile. Pick up the Glock. I moved to the table, selected the compact pistol he had been examining. It was heavier than I expected, the metal cold against my palm. Jaehoon circled behind me. And suddenly, his chest was against my back, his arms coming around to adjust my grip. Your stance is wrong, he murmured against my ear, sending a shiver down my spine. Feet shoulder width apart. Bend your knees slightly. You're too rigid. His hands slid down my arms, repositioning them. Every point of contact felt electric, dangerous in a way that had nothing to do with the weapon I held. I could feel his breath against the sensitive skin of my neck. Could smell that expensive cologne mixed with smoke and steel. Now, he continued, his voice dropping lower. You need to control your breathing. In through your nose. Out through your mouth. The shot comes on the exhale. I tried to focus on the target downrange, a paper silhouette that looked disturbingly human. But all I could think about was the solid weight of his body against mine. The way his hands covered my smaller ones, guiding my aim with a gentleness that contradicted everything I knew about him. Squeeze the trigger, he instructed. Don't pull. Gentle pressure. Like. The gun kicked in my hands. The report was deafening, even with ear protection. The bullet went wide, punching through the concrete wall 2 feet left of the target. Better than I expected for a first shot, Jae-hoon said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. Again. We spent the next hour like that. His body pressed against mine. His hands correcting my form. His voice low and patient as he talked me through each shot. By the end, I was hitting the target center mass more often than not, and my body was humming with an awareness that had nothing to do with adrenaline and everything to do with the man standing behind me. When he finally stepped back, the absence of his touch felt like a physical loss. You're a natural, he said. And there was something in his tone that made my pulse quicken. Or maybe just desperate enough to learn fast. Both, probably. I set the gun down carefully, turned to face him. What now? Now we plan. He moved to a wall covered in maps and photographs, his expression shifting back to business. You said you heard Bianca mention specific dates in that wine cellar. What exactly did she say? I closed my eyes, pulling up the memory of that moment between the wine bottles. She said something about il matrimonio anticipato. The wedding being moved up much sooner than planned. Jae-hoon's jaw clenched. That's 3 days from now. They're rushing the ceremony. Why? Because Woo-jin knows I'm alive and hunting him. A wedding creates legitimacy. Witnesses. It makes him harder to kill without starting an all-out war between the families. He pointed to a satellite image on the wall, a sprawling estate surrounded by gardens. The Moretti compound. 40 acres outside the city. Private security. Probably 100 armed guards the day of the wedding. So, we can't get in. I didn't say that. His eyes met mine, and they were filled with dangerous promise. I said it would be difficult. There's a difference. What are you planning? Instead of answering, he pulled out his phone, spoke rapid Korean into it. A moment later, one of his men appeared with a laptop. Jae-hoon opened it, typed something, then turned the screen toward me. Guest list. Hundreds of names organized by family affiliation. We're going to the wedding, Jae-hoon said flatly. You and me. As guests. That's insane. They'll kill you on sight. Only if they recognize me. He pulled up another window on the laptop. Disguise options. Fake identities. I've been planning for something like this. Multiple backup identities. Contacts in the Korean expat community who can vouch for me. He looked at me. We'll attend as a couple. Wealthy investors from Seoul looking to establish connections in Chicago. I stared at him. You can't be serious. I'm always serious about revenge. He closed the laptop, moved closer until we were sharing the same air again. But I need you for this to work. Bianca and Woo-jin know my face. But they don't know yours well enough to recognize you in formal wear, with professional makeup. You'll be my shield. My distraction. And what happens when we're inside? His smile was cold as winter. We destroy them. Expose the pregnancy. Reveal Woo-jin's betrayal of the family codes. Turn the Morettis and Kangs against each other. And then, in the chaos, we eliminate the threat permanently. The casualness with which he discussed murder should have horrified me. Should have sent me running for that unlocked door he kept mentioning. But instead, I found myself asking, what do you need me to do? Be brilliant, he said, reaching out, his fingers brushing my cheek with unexpected tenderness. Be brave. Be exactly what you were in that restaurant. Someone willing to save a stranger's life, even when it meant risking everything. I'm not brave. I'm terrified. Fear and bravery aren't opposites, Kenna. Bravery is being terrified and doing it anyway. His thumb traced my jawline, the touch sending shivers down my spine. You've already proven you have that. We stood there, suspended in a moment that felt both endless and too brief. His hand cupped my face, and I found myself leaning into the touch despite every logical reason not to. If we do this, I whispered, if we go to that wedding and everything goes wrong, then we die together. I don't plan on dying, he said, his voice low and rough. And I don't plan on letting anything happen to you. Not again. You can't promise that. Watch me. And then he was kissing me. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate and claiming, his mouth crushing against mine with the force of everything unspoken between us. The fear, the fury, the impossible pull that had existed since the moment our eyes met across that restaurant table. I gasped against his lips, and he took advantage, deepening the kiss until I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only feel. My hands found his chest, fingers curling into his shirt. He backed me against the weapons table, the edge pressing into my hips as he caged me in with his arms. The kiss broke for a moment, just long enough for us to gasp for air, and then his mouth was on my neck, teeth grazing the sensitive skin there. We shouldn't, I managed, even as my head tilted back to give him better access. Probably not. His voice was rough against my throat. One word and this ends. I stop. Every rational part of my brain screamed at me to push him away. To remember that this man was dangerous, that I was trapped in his world with no way out, that whatever this was between us was built on violence and desperation. But I didn't want to stop. The door to the training facility burst open. We sprang apart, both breathing hard. One of Jaehoon's guards stood there, eyes wide, speaking urgent Korean. Jaehoon's expression shifted instantly from desire to deadly focus. What is it? News from the Moretti compound. He was already moving toward the door, his hand finding mine and pulling me with him. Woo Jin just sent out the official wedding invitations. And he included a personal message for me. What kind of message? I asked, trying to steady my voice. His grip on my hand tightened. An invitation to attend. Front row seat to watch him claim everything I've built. He thinks I'm too much of a coward to show up. Or it's a trap. Of course it's a trap. Jaehoon's smile was savage. That's what makes it interesting. The plan was insane. I had said as much 17 times in the 3 days since Jaehoon had outlined it, and each time he had responded with the same infuriating calm. Insanity is what makes it work. Now, the night before the wedding, the air in the stronghold felt heavy with anticipation. We were sitting in the penthouse living room. The lights were low, the city outside a grid of amber and white. Jaehoon, I asked, watching him pour 2 glasses of wine. What happens if we fail tomorrow? We won't. But if we do? A long pause. Then I'll make sure you survive. Whatever it costs. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have. He handed me a glass, then sat down beside me on the sofa. Close. Too close. The memory of the kiss in the training room hung between us like smoke. I sent a package to Woo Jin today, he said quietly. What kind of package? His smile was cold. Remember the priest who was supposed to officiate the wedding? The corrupt Father Michaels who blessed mob weddings for the right price. Vaguely. I had him picked up 3 hours ago. He's been persuaded to reconsider his career choices. Jaehoon's expression was carved from ice. I sent Woo Jin his hand. His right hand, specifically. Wearing my mother's wedding ring. The casual brutality of it should have horrified me. Should have sent me scrambling from the sofa, from this man, from the monstrous world he inhabited. Instead, I asked, why your mother's ring? Because Woo Jin's mother, my father's first wife, died in childbirth. My mother raised him as her own son until my father exiled him. She loved that boy like he was hers. Jaehoon's voice roughened. And he repaid that love by trying to destroy everything she built. Everyone she protected. The ring is a message. You betrayed family, I whispered, realizing the code. This is what happens to those who betray family. I lay back against the cushions, watching him. You really are a monster, aren't you? Yes. He said it without hesitation. Without shame. But I'm your monster now. That should terrify me. Does it? I thought about it. Really thought about what I had become in the past 4 days. The girl who had served appetizers at the Gilded Lotus wouldn't have recognized the woman sitting here, complicit in torture and murder, planning to crash a wedding that would end in bloodshed. But that girl had also watched her father slowly die because she couldn't afford proper treatment. That girl had been invisible, powerless. This woman? This woman had power, had choices, had a dangerous man who had moved heaven and earth to keep her father alive, who had trained her to fight, who looked at her like she was precious even when she was covered in bruises and rice dust. No, I said finally. It doesn't terrify me. Not anymore. His eyes darkened. He took the wine glass from my hand and set it on the table. Get some sleep, Kenna. Tomorrow we end this. I don't want to sleep. No. I reached out, my fingers tracing the line of his jaw. I want to finish what we started in the training room. We shed clothes slowly, giving each other time to change our minds, but neither of us did. His hands mapped my body like he was memorizing every curve, every scar, every imperfection. I did the same, tracing the old wounds that decorated his skin, bullet grazes, knife cuts, the physical history of a violent life written in raised white tissue. You're beautiful, he whispered. And there was a reverence in his voice that made me believe him, made me feel seen in a way I never had before. When he finally moved over me, his weight pressing me into the expensive sheets, everything else fell away. The fear, the anger, the impossible situation we were trapped in. There was only this, his body against mine, his breath mixing with mine, the feeling of being claimed and claiming in return. It wasn't gentle. Neither of us needed gentle. It was fierce and desperate. A taking and giving that left us both gasping. He moved inside me like he was trying to brand himself on my soul. And I met him, thrust for thrust, nails digging into his shoulders hard enough to leave marks. Mine, he growled against my throat. And I should have protested the possessiveness. Should have reminded him that I wasn't property to be owned. But instead, I gasped, yours, and meant it. When we finally shattered together, it felt like falling and flying simultaneously. He collapsed beside me, pulling me against his chest, and we lay there in the darkness, listening to the lake whisper against the shore. Tomorrow, he said quietly, his fingers tracing patterns on my bare shoulder. Tomorrow we change the world. I finally drifted off wrapped in his arms, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat counting down the hours until dawn. The dress Jaehoon had waiting for me the next morning was a work of art. Midnight blue silk that hugged my curves, with long sleeves and a neckline that was elegant but not conservative. It looked innocent. It was anything but. Ballistic weave sewn into the bodice, he explained, adjusting the fabric at my shoulders. It won't stop a direct shot from a high-caliber rifle, but it'll slow a handgun round enough to keep it from being immediately fatal. I stared at my reflection in the mirror. Professional makeup transformed my face. Dramatic eyes, bold lips, cheekbones highlighted until I looked like someone who belonged among Chicago's elite. My hair was swept up in an elegant twist, revealing the diamond earrings Jaehoon had given me. They weren't just jewelry. They contained microtransmitters so his team could track my location inside the estate. I look like someone else, I said. You look like a queen. He appeared behind me in the mirror, devastatingly handsome in a charcoal suit. His own disguise was minimal but effective, colored contacts turning his dark eyes hazel, his hair styled differently, a fake scar on his jaw. Bianca and Woo Jin have only seen you disheveled and terrified. This version of you? They won't recognize her until it's too late. A knock at the door interrupted us. One of Jaehoon's men entered carrying a tablet. When Jaehoon turned the screen toward me, I saw what was on it and had to swallow hard against nausea. The photo of the severed hand looked waxy, unreal. The ring on its third finger gleamed, a simple gold band with Korean characters engraved inside. It's already been delivered, the man said in English for my benefit. Woo Jin received it an hour ago. Good. Jaehoon checked his watch with clinical detachment. Then he knows I'm coming. The question is whether his arrogance will let him believe I'd be stupid enough to actually show up. What if he's evacuated the wedding? I asked. He won't. That would show weakness. Fear. And Woo Jin's fatal flaw has always been his pride. Jaehoon turned to me, his expression serious. Once we're inside, stay close. Don't drink anything offered to you. Don't eat anything. Don't let anyone separate us. And if things go wrong, he pulled out a small pistol. Elegant. Compact. Deadly. This fits in that hidden pocket we built into your dress. If anyone threatens you, don't hesitate. Shoot first. Apologize never. The weight of the weapon settled against my hip, cold and heavy with implication. I was really doing this. Walking into a building full of enemies, armed with a gun and a prayer, trusting a man I'd known for less than a week. The drive to the Moretti estate felt surreal. We passed through security checkpoints easily, Jaehoon's false identity holding up under scrutiny, our names on the guest list thanks to his contacts in the Korean business community. No one looked at us twice. The ceremony was set up in the estate's grand ballroom. Hundreds of chairs faced an altar decorated with white roses. Guests mingled in the foyer, expensive suits, designer dresses, the beautiful people who made the world spin through money and violence. I spotted Bianca immediately. She stood near the entrance to the ballroom, greeting guests, radiant in a gown that shimmered like it belonged to royalty rather than a trader. When her eyes passed over me, there was no recognition. Just a polite smile, a slight nod, the casual dismissal of someone who didn't matter. She doesn't see you, Jaehoon murmured against my ear. Well done. We took our seats 6 rows back. Close enough to see, but not so close we'd be immediately noticeable. The ceremony began right on time. Processional music swelled as bridesmaids made their way down the aisle. Then Bianca appeared, and the room collectively held its breath. She looked like a fairy tale, all white silk and diamonds, her smile radiant and false. Woojin waited at the altar. Seeing him in person made my skin crawl. He had Jaehoon's build, but his face was crueler, sharper. He looked at Bianca like she was a crown he was about to place on his head. The priest, a replacement for Father Michael's, obviously began the ceremony. Standard words about love and commitment and forever. Each one ringing hollow in this space where marriage was just another business transaction. Jaehoon's hand found mine, his grip tight. Almost time, he whispered. For what? Instead of answering, he pulled out his phone, typed something quickly, and hit send. The massive screens positioned around the ballroom, meant to show close-ups of the happy couple to the back rows, suddenly flickered. Then they went black. Then they came back on, but not with the wedding feed. Bianca's voice filled the ballroom, booming through the high-end sound system. Si al tavolo uno. Vicino al vetro. The recording from the wine cellar. Jaehoon had somehow obtained it, from the restaurant security system, maybe, or from his own surveillance. It didn't matter how. What mattered was that everyone in this room could now hear Bianca confirming the hit on Park Jae-hoon. The screen showed security footage from the Gilded Lotus. Timestamped. Indisputable. Bianca on her phone. Bianca entering the restaurant's back office where the hit team was staged. Bianca smiling at Jae-hoon across the table while her assassins moved into position. Chaos erupted. Guests surged to their feet, shouting. The Moretti family elders looked murderous. Woojin's face had gone white, then red, fury twisting his features. Who did this? He roared, his voice cutting through the chaos. Who dares? I do. Jae-hoon stood. And the entire ballroom fell silent. He reached up, removed the colored contacts in a smooth motion, revealing his true, obsidian eyes. Hello, brother. Did you miss me? The room exploded. Moretti soldiers reached for weapons. Korean enforcers positioned throughout the ballroom, Jae-hoon's sleeper agents, did the same. Guests screamed and scrambled for exits. Jae-hoon walked calmly down the aisle toward the altar, his hand still holding mine, pulling me with him. You're dead, Woojin snarled. I watched the warehouse explode. I counted the bodies. You counted the bodies I wanted you to count. Jae-hoon stopped 10 feet from the altar, utterly fearless despite being surrounded by dozens of armed men. Did you really think I'd be stupid enough to hide where your little spy could find me? Bianca's face had gone chalk white. Jay, I can explain. Can you explain the pregnancy test in your purse showing you're 4 months along? Jae-hoon pulled out a piece of paper. Medical records. Can you explain that genetic testing proves the child is Wu Jin's? That you've been sleeping with my brother for 6 months while planning our wedding. The Moretti family elders turned on Bianca as one, their expressions murderous. In their world, this level of betrayal demanded blood. The wedding is a sham, Jae-hoon continued, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. Wu Jin has been dead to the Park family for 5 years. He has no claim to our territory, our businesses, our name. This marriage would have been invalid from the start. A bastard and a whore trying to steal an empire through fraud. Wu Jin finally moved. He pulled a gun from inside his tuxedo jacket. But he didn't point it at Jae-hoon. He pointed it at me. Let's see how brave you are when your little pet is bleeding out, he snarled. Time slowed. I saw Jae-hoon's expression shift from controlled fury to raw terror. Saw him start to move, to put himself between me and the gun. Saw Bianca's hand reaching for something hidden in her bouquet. And I remembered the weapon hidden in my dress. I moved on pure instinct. My hand found the pistol, pulling it free, raising it in one smooth motion that Jae-hoon had drilled into me over hours in the training room. 3 things happened simultaneously. Wu Jin fired. I fired. The room erupted into warfare. The impact hit me in the chest, exactly where Jae-hoon had sewn the ballistic weave. It felt like being kicked by a horse, knocking the air from my lungs with a force that sent me stumbling back. But the bullet didn't penetrate. I stayed on my feet. Wu Jin wasn't so lucky. My shot caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around. He went down hard, his gun clattering away. Then chaos consumed everything. The Moretti soldiers and park enforcers opened fire on each other. The wedding guests stampeded for exits, screams, and gunshots, creating a symphony of violence. Jae-hoon grabbed me, pulling me behind a marble column as bullets tore through the space we'd been standing in. You shot him, he said, and there was wonder in his voice amidst the gunfire. You actually shot him. You told me not to hesitate. I pressed my hand against my chest, feeling the massive bruise already forming beneath the dress. Is it always going to hurt this much? Probably. He leaned around the column, returned fire, dropping a Moretti soldier who had gotten too close. We need to move. The exit plan. Bianca appeared from nowhere. A gun in her hand, her wedding dress torn and splattered with blood that wasn't hers. Her face was a mask of fury and desperation. You ruined everything, she hissed at me. You were supposed to die in that basement. You were supposed to be nothing. I was never nothing. The words came out steady. Certain. I was just invisible. There's a difference. She raised the gun, pointing it at my face. This time, there was no ballistic weave to protect me. No time for Jae-hoon to intervene. No last-minute miracle. So I didn't wait for one. I threw myself forward inside her guard, grabbing her wrist and forcing the gun upward. It discharged, the shot going wild into the ceiling. We struggled, her strength surprising, her desperation making her dangerous. My hand found the weapon in her bouquet. A knife. Small and sharp. I didn't think. I didn't hesitate. I just survived. The blade slid between her ribs with horrifying ease. Her eyes went wide, shocked, and she stumbled back. The gun fell from her hand, clattering on the marble floor. You! She gasped, blood spreading across the white silk of her wedding dress like a red flower blooming. You're just a waitress. I was a waitress. I stepped back, watching her crumple to the floor. Now I'm something else. Jae-hoon appeared beside me, his hand finding mine. We need to go. Now. The Moretti soldiers were in full retreat. The park enforcers were systematically eliminating the remaining threats. Wu Jin lay motionless where he'd fallen, blood pooling beneath him. Whether he was dead or dying, I couldn't tell. Jae-hoon led me through the chaos, his body constantly positioned between me and any potential threats. We burst out into the gardens where the SUV waited, engine running. His men provided covering fire as we ran, bullets tearing through the carefully manicured rose bushes. We made it to the vehicle, tumbled inside, and the driver took off before the door was even closed. Behind us, the Moretti estate burned. Whether from fire started in the chaos or deliberately set, I didn't know. Only when we were miles away did I finally let myself breathe. You killed her, Jae-hoon said quietly. Bianca, you killed her yourself. Yes. I stared at my hands, expecting to see blood, but finding only torn silk from her bouquet. I killed her. How do you feel? I waited for the guilt. The horror. The crushing weight of having ended a human life. But all I felt was tired. Satisfied. Free. Like I survived, I said finally. He pulled me against him, and I buried my face in his chest, letting the adrenaline finally crash. We'd done it. We'd walked into the heart of enemy territory, exposed the betrayal, eliminated the threats. We'd survived together. What happens now? I asked against his shirt. Now we rebuild. His arms tightened around me. The Park Empire is mine again. The Morettas are in chaos without Bianca or their alliance with Woo Jin. And you? What about me? He pulled back, cupping my face in his hands. You're the queen of this empire now. If you want to be. My partner. My equal. Not my prisoner or my responsibility. But my choice. If you'll have me. I looked into his dark eyes. No longer cold, but warm with something that looked dangerously like love. What about my father? Has the best medical care money can buy. For the rest of his life. And you never have to work another day unless you want to. And if I want to? Then work. Build something. Change the world. He smiled. Just do it beside me. Outside, Chicago rolled past the windows. The city we'd just set on fire. The world we'd claimed through blood and violence. It should have felt wrong. It should have felt like a mistake. Instead, it felt like coming home. Yes, I said, and kissed him. I'll have you. Monster and all. Good. He kissed me back, deep and claiming. Because I'm never letting you go. 3 months later, my father woke up from his coma. The doctors called it a miracle. Jae-hoon called it expensive medicine and better equipment. I called it grace. I was sitting beside his bed when his eyes opened, holding his hand like I'd done 100 times before. But this time, his fingers squeezed back. Kenna, he whispered, his voice rough from disuse. Where am I? Safe, I smiled through tears. You're safe, Daddy. Everything's going to be okay. And for the first time in years, I actually believed it. The stronghold by the lake was no longer just Jae-hoon's fortress. It was ours. We'd made it a home. Not soft or conventional, but ours nonetheless. The concrete walls were still gray, but I'd added touches of color, plants that somehow survived the harsh lake wind, books that we read together on quiet evenings, the Go game we still hadn't finished. My father lived in the East Wing, his suite equipped with everything he needed to recover. Jae-hoon visited him often, the two of them playing chess while I watched a strange, surrogate family forged from violence and survival. The Park Empire continued, but differently. Jae-hoon was working to legitimize the businesses, to phase out the worst of the violence. It would take years, maybe decades. Some things would never be legal or moral. But we were trying. That had to count for something. On a cold December night, exactly 1 year after the wedding that became a massacre, Jae-hoon found me standing by the windows, watching snow fall over the frozen lake. Regretting your choice? He asked, wrapping his arms around me from behind. Never. Not even a little. I turned in his embrace, looking up at the man who'd started as a stranger across a restaurant table and become the center of my world. You gave me my father back. You gave me power when I had none. You made me visible when the world ignored me. I also made you a killer. No. I pressed my hand against his chest, feeling his heartbeat beneath my palm. You made me a survivor. There's a difference. He kissed me then, soft and deep. And outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the world in white, hiding the blood, making everything look clean and new. It was an illusion, of course. Underneath, the violence remained. The Empire. The enemies who would always be circling, looking for weakness. But we'd face them together. Monster and Waitress. Killer and survivor. King and queen of a brutal empire built on concrete and winter wind, and a single note slipped across a restaurant table that changed everything. Outside, the city slept. Inside, we ruled. This is where the chapter ends, But the story of Afro-Korean soul tales is just beginning, so if you want to know what happens when the snow melts and the buried secrets surface, smash that subscribe button right now, like this video to show your loyalty to the family. And drop a comment below telling me if you would have pulled the trigger.